cusp of getting into test number 1. And excuse me, and topic 4 is part of test number 1. So pay attention to all the hints that I'm going to give you, right, as we go forward. And what I'm going to do is I'll get through some of the links, some of the logistics of test number 1. And then after that, I'll just stop and answer any questions, all right? But the main topic around topic 4 commentary is organizational structure. And what I'm going to be talking about completely is you always have form, which is structure, follows function, which is strategy. And a lot of companies, use their old structures, get into new businesses and can't understand, why nothing's working. And so that you really need to understand the why before you do the what, right? And that's really key. So this first slide on here on topic 4, there's different types of organizational structures. And what's predominant today is a network structure, mainly because of most projects are done, online, and they're done through the best of the best in terms of members, and they could contract, organizations, especially like, the oil companies, they will contract the best consultant in any part of the world. And that's why it turns out to be a network structure. So it's very fluid, and it's and that's why, part of this program is all about, doing remote team work, and all because most of it will become that as you become a contractor, as you go through in your next few careers. All right. So I'm going to talk about those things, but I'm going to start right with what's really important in terms of knowledge is going to the Pearson-Revel, the Pearson-Revel chapter 5 presentation. And the thing is, it's a must study deck for test number 2, but also test number 1, because you need to understand, some of these structures for doing that. And what I did was I put the Blackboard link in. And again, this is the most recent edition of this topic 4 commentary, and it's also installed, on Blackboard, so that you can follow me, with, to the updated presentation. So you'll see it as May 5th, 19. Sorry, May 19. The 5th month, but this particular chapter is really important, and it will answer a lot of questions for you on test 1 and test 2. So go with that, all right? And these are the main objectives of this Robbins chapter 5. You look at the 6 key elements in organizational structure. So what makes them robust, what makes them work, the factors that affect organizational structure, and that's all about having a good situational analysis to be able to come up with the right factor or the right factors to work with to design that organizational structure, common organizational designs, and then contemporary organizational design challenges. All right, so that's what that chapter is all about, and I strongly recommend that you look at that. So let's just talk about the deliverables for topic 4. That should say topic 4. And so what you have for topic 4 are 3 Pearson-Revel surveys to do. And again, take a look at these practice tests, and you can find them, on topic, in topic 4, just down, start kind of going down the actual view of topic 4, and you'll find them, and it has the solutions as well. So that should give you an idea of what's, how the questions are formulated on the test. There's not any questions there that will be on the test, but it'll give you a good idea, of what we're looking for. Okay, so in terms of the deliverables, participation topic 4A, again, that's a group exercise. And what I'd like you to do is, use that company that you decided to work with, and be mindful of triple bottom line. And I'm going to talk about that in the next few slides as well. So what that is that it's basically the new view of how to make sure that you're socially responsible, you're environmentally responsible, and oh, by the way, you still have to make profit to make the business work, right? And so you're going to be answering these questions on, what's your organization's mandate? And what's a good thing about that from a triple bottom line perspective, and again, I'm going to explain this a little better, and then what's a bad thing from a triple bottom line perspective. So just an example, say, is that like McDonald's doesn't clean their coffee machines. Well, you know, from a people point of view, a social point of view, not good for their health, right? So those are the kind of things to take a look at. All right, from 4B, again, reviewing Chapter 5, organizational structure, you know, will help you do this. And it's based on your topic 3A choice. You create an organizational structure, and then we're going to comment on how that gets done. So basically, it's basically a line and box depiction of the organization. And also what I'm asking you to do is that don't do it by hand, all right? Do it kind of neat so I can, when I get on it, I can really see what's going on. And the thing is that, you know, it should have, it should be at least larger than 5 people, this organization, to be able to create a meaningful organization chart. So it's not just talking about the owner and a helper, you know, and if you have to be a little bit imaginative, please do so to kind of to take a look at that. And then we're going to talk about, you know, centralization and specialization. So provide some information about that business. And then you'll see in the slides that we're going to cover, you know, we're going to talk about centralization and decentralization and the degree of specialization in organizations. So those are all the things that you're going to come up against. And again, you know, if you have any questions, by all means, send me an email. And if I feel that the rest of the class can merit from your question, you know, I will put it on the announcement with the solution that I provide. Okay, so let's talk about test number 1. So test number 1 is online. You know, it's a remote on Blackboard, and you access that test through topic 5. So there's a link there, and you click on that link to be able to get into there. All right, this, you know, that's roughly what it looks like. And again, I'll remind you that reviewing the materials you covered in assignment 2 will help you on test number 1. In particular, you know, these few theorists like Henry Fayol and Chester Barnard, Henry Mintzberg, Charles Spalding, and Frederick Taylor. Those are the, you know, the 5 that are going to be talked about in the test for 1 or 2 questions. So just so you know about that, right? And you can, that's there's a timeline for that test, so you can gain access to tomorrow at 8 a.m. until you know, the next day at 11:55. So you got you know, if you've got a schedule problem, you know, you can get over that. And the test content, excuse me. The test content is going to be topics 1, 2, 3, and 4. There will be 50 multiple choice questions, mainly multiple choice, a few true and false questions. The duration is 80 minutes. And after 80 minutes, what happens online, you know, it'll shut you down. It'll close the test. So be mindful of the time that you're spending. And again, you access this under topic 5, and you know, that's that link that you click into. And then there'll be no numerical computation type questions on that. It's mainly all fact-based and over those 50 questions. But one of the key things to remember is that be prepared to have your lockdown browser downloaded and tested, all right? And also verify that your webcam is working prior to test number 1. And normally what happens is that people leave it to, you know, just shortly before the test, and then something goes wrong and then they can't remedy it. So that's what to remind yourself of. And if you need information about the lockdown, you can see in the Blackboard navigation panel, I put some information there. It may be a little dated, but you can always, you know, contact the library and find out, you know, what's missing in terms of that. So here's the study approach. And what I want you to focus on is on the left-hand side of this, this process. All right. So what's most important? All the commentary PowerPoints have highlighting, bolding, underlining to really point you to the right content to be able to be studying. And the 3 chapters that are associated with test number 1 make sure that you go through those 3 chapters. And again, you can find them, under the commentary information, on the left-hand side of, where you find the commentary presentations. You'll find these presentations that are listed there as well that you can access. And then do the test practice questions to see how you're doing, and then review the Blackboard participation activities that you've done as well. And then the rest of it now, looking at the Blackboard slide decks, I've incorporated the key slides in these commentary presentations, but you can get more information, on those slide decks that are in Blackboard. And then if you really don't quite get something, you can go into those video presentations, and then the last but not least, go into the course e-text for better explanations. All right. But don't forget, test your device for Respondus lockdown and webcam capability well before the test. And again, that's what it looks like. Okay. So I'm going to stop there and say, any questions at all about the test? Just you can unmute and ask the question, or fill out in the chat line.
Will the questions be based on the ones in the practice questions?
Yeah, they're going to be very similar. So the format of it and the approach will be identical. All right. It's just that none of those questions in that practice are on the test. That's all you got to know. So thanks. That's a good question. Any other questions? Okay, I hope I've made it more straightforward for you. And the thing is, what's key is, these 2 guys are really key. And that's where you're going to get most of your information. And like these chapters are really kind of, will round out, where I've put, not in all cases, but where I've put, these the highlighting and the underlining and the bolding. All right, so that's where that is. Okay, so now we're starting to get into organizational structure, and that's part of topic 4 that we're going to talk about. And you got to understand is what is a function? All right, and a function is a combination of understanding your organization's value proposition, its strategy, and its business model. Right, and I'm going to keep on telling you, form follows function. That's what you start with. Why are we here, and what do we really want to accomplish, and how do we think we're going to accomplish that? When you answer those questions, then it kind of falls out. Okay, how do you structure to be able to be the most effective in getting to the outcomes that you've set up in your vision and your goals? All right. So, and you never get the ultimate organizational structure right the first time. And Henry Mintzberg is a big proponent of really understanding. And matter of fact, when I was going through my schooling, he was the guy that really made it easy to understand what a structure is and how it should behave and how it should be put together, right? And what Henry Mintzberg says is that you never really get the strategy bang on. You do the best research that you possibly can, but you don't know what's out there until you start executing on that strategy. And if you're a learning organization, and I'm going to talk about that, Peter Senge wrote a book called The Learning Organization. And what it is that you can't just have this perfect plan and expect to achieve something. You've got to plan, and then you've got to learn if this plan is right. And then you have to recalibrate that plan based on the learnings of the market and what's being thrown at you through the environment. And so that then you finally get to what Henry Mintzberg calls a realized strategy. And then now you can really tweak your organization from a structural point of view, to execute properly and effectively. Okay, so here's a little bit of the work that I've been doing over the last 30 years, right? My wheelhouse is strategic planning, and what you go through, and then when you're doing an organization is you look at a vision, a mission, and goals, objectives, and then you create what they call a value proposition. What is it of value that you're offering your customer base, and based on that value proposition, what's the strategy to effectuate bringing that value proposition to the market? And oh, by the way, you need a robust business model to be able to bring that about. But again, this is really the crux of your business, is a value proposition, a strategy, and the business model. And I'll keep on talking about form follows function. And that's once you've looked at that business model, now you start structuring your organization. You put that together to be able to make it as effective as possible. And when we're going back, we talked about effectiveness and efficiency, right? And effectiveness is doing the right things, and efficiency is doing the right things right. Okay, so that's what that's all about. So if your strategy is right, your business model builds in the competitive advantage, then it's all about execution, of the value proposition, and you do that through the most optimum organizational structure that you could possibly put together. Okay, so here's a little bit about the learning organization. I quoted Senge, the fifth discipline, and really what it is that I did a lot of business plans on the consulting side of excuse me, in my small business. All right, and I always told my customers, look at I'd rather have a sort of a half decent business plan, and you knowing your market and learning and be able to execute and recalibrating, than having a perfect plan with you thinking there's nothing left to do. Right. So that's where the learning organization comes in. And this is sort of monumental information. Like Peter Senge was a rock star, theorist when he came up with this. And there's things to be able to learn from that as you're going forward. Notice there's no highlighting on here, but it's a good piece of the information that brings this all together. All right. So again, there's Peter Senge. You need this learning organization. Here's Mintzberg's strategy model saying, you get to a realized strategy after you learn what's going on, and you need a really good business model to do that, along with your value proposition. And now you build the organizational structure that's required to be able to execute in the marketplace. So form, the structure, follows function. The strategy, the things that give you some leverage on why you're doing that and how you're going to do it. Okay. Again, can't say enough. Form follows function. Okay. So, and even in the digital world now, form still follows function. So, what does the end user need that thing to do? Right. That's really what you're trying to get to. And that's how you formulate your value proposition. And it's unlikely, to function optimally for a specific purpose. If you don't have the customer in mind and why you're doing that, to be able to put that particular structure together. Okay, so here's a reminder. All right, you did that assignment 2, and I just started marking it. So far, it looks pretty good. Everybody has really kind of listened to the instructions and are following through. And again, I'd ask you to review that assignment number 2 for the test number 1. Okay, so here's just every now and again, I try to give you some helpful hints, hopefully. And one of the things that would really help you is that if you did have the slides beside you and they were printed and you can actually write notes by hand, that's really what makes the neurons connect, right, in your brain. So it observes the connectivity of different brain regions increase. So there's no secret about that, is that, use a little neuroscience in the studying that you're doing. If you want to read this article, that's great, but I hope to be able to share that with you. Okay, again, I talked about this test number 1. It's a remote access. It's gonna be available. It won't come until at 8 a.m. That's when it shows up. So if you go there earlier and you don't see it, it's because it's not time to come in until 8 a.m. until May 21 at 11:55. Right? I talked about all these things. But here's where the lockdown browser comes in, and especially if any of you have a Chromebook, then you better check this out. Because the software, the lockdown browser, doesn't work as well with Chromebook. So if you are a Chromebook user, I'd suggest you talk to the library and make sure that you're prepared to be able to do that. And, and here's where, there's in the navigational panel in Blackboard, you can see a little bit more information on the lockdown browser. Okay. Test it, and again, you can actually do a practice test, to do that in the topics as well. And it's near the end of the topic 5 postings if you want to make sure that it really works. Okay, so any questions about that? Okay, just give me a thumbs up if I can start moving on. Thumbs up. Okay, good. Thanks, George. Okay, so now let's just talk about triple bottom line. And triple bottom line is all about sustainability, right? It's all about making sure that we have resources for generations to come. And there was I came across this one thing is that the way that we consume things on this planet, by the year 2050. If we're doing the consumption at the same rate, we're going to need 3 Earths. Based on the eastern part of the world is coming up on standard of living and needing more product and everything else. So at some point in time, we're going to hit the wall. And the more that we can kind of incorporate this kind of framework into our business thinking, the better off that the whole world's going to be. So it's all about people, planet, and they used to say profit. Now you're starting to see a lot of people, planet, and prosperity. And I think prosperity is a little more widened in scope. Everybody wants to be prosperous rather than just have money in their pocket, right? Okay, so it's being integrated in the newer management principles. So it's going to become even more important, as we move forward, in this world that we're living in, and how we need to adapt to new management theories and new management principles. And it's it's becoming it needs to become the part of who we are, right? And what it does is it provokes a deeper thinking about capitalism, right? Capitalism means something to people right now. It should mean a lot more in terms of triple bottom line, as we move on in history here. So it's a transformational framework. It's a move towards a regenerative and more sustainable future. And the thing is, in today's world, it's an organization measure. It's a benchmark. I mean, and I'm going to talk about corporate social responsibility, and we're going to see that in topic 12. But the corporations have to be more responsible, and now they measure this to be able to, and not only that, it attracts better investment that way as well. All right, so what we're doing is we're not really accounting for the full cost of doing business in today's world. And if any of you have taken economics, you'll see that in the concepts that you're coming across. There's things outside of the equation, that people should be taking in, in terms of, you buy a car, but there's the cost of pollution that you're creating. All right. So those are the kind of things that you need to start thinking about. So it's going to relate to corporate social responsibility. You can see that there's, no highlighting here. I mean, well, there's, a little bit of underlining, but nothing in yellow. And the whole thing around the planet part is that it holds organizations accountable for their actions. And that's where that's going. So prosperity considers the economic indicators over which an organization or a business has influence. And so livable wages, ethical sourcing, workplace health and safety, those kind of things. All right. So triple bottom line is sort of a systemic way to get there. And people are investing differently. So the consumer now has some leverage on influencing what organizations must do. And so they'll buy ethical stocks. And there's this thing called environmental, social, and governance factors. And they've gained a lot of prominence in the world in investing in recent years. So it's just inevitable. Okay, I can't talk about that very much more, but just know that the rise of ESG investing is really kind of putting more heat on organizations, to be good, corporate, responsible entities. So what are the benefits? Well, things are going to improve in terms of ecological and social aspects. The business becomes a lot more meaningful and attracts new customers and investors. So, there's a lot of upside to doing that. Lots of challenges, though. It's not easy to do. TVL is not easy to implement. There's, in some cases, there's low recognition still for it. And sometimes it's legally compulsive at times. And again, some organizations just do the spin, it's called greenwashing, and they make it look like they're doing a lot, but they aren't. And then there's clashing objectives. So all those things come into play. But what it comes down to is becoming good ancestors, the urgency of long-term thinking. And oh, by the way, if you take a look at what China's doing and how their conversion rate to electricity from fossil fuels, it's incredible. They get it, all right? And you're going to see a lot of leadership out of there too. And you go back to Aboriginal peoples. I think I talked about this earlier. Is the Iroquois Nation, in North America, when the elders made a decision to do something, they would look forward to 7 generations. And that had impact on how they made those decisions. And we need to get back to that, all right? We need to become good ancestors. So that's what that's all about. So we need to be more accountable, in doing things. And again, it comes back to caring, right? And caring now is a new component of the of the management principles that need to be there, especially in the advent of artificial intelligence. How do we make a personal empathetic connection with future generations who we've never met before, right? And so I've done some reading. Rita McGrath is probably one of the foremost influential business thinkers around, how to, incorporate in the new era of empathy inside of how we make management decisions. Okay, and this is what it's all about. It's, here's where, when all these three come together, this is where we have sustainability. This is where, our future generations are still going to enjoy the same things that we can. So any questions about that? We're all good? Quiet group here. Okay, thumbs up. Let's keep on going. Okay, good. If I'm talking a little bit too fast, I'm trying to make time. There's a lot of information that I need to cover in topics 4 and 5. So just slow me down, right? Maybe just send me put a sad face down or something, or send me a chat text. Okay, so now we're starting to get into the real content of topic 4, the organizational chart examples. And one thing leads to another. We're going to go from structure, to actual, production layout, right? It's all kind of cascading down to, doing the right things right. Okay, so, and there's different types of organizational structures. So if you look at the Army or the fire service or the police service, they're mainly a hierarchical structure. Why? Because there's so much at risk, and strict controls need to be there to maintain, a watch over loss of life or loss of property. Functional structures, well, like an accountancy firm, they're all specialists that do special things with a high level of competence and guaranteed and rightness about what they're doing. So functional structure has a lot of good benefits in certain areas. A matrix structure is more of a project type structure. And what it is, it allows many types of disciplines to come together, all right, to be able to have the diversity and the prowess around idea management and know, all ends of the actual supply chain, from bringing the resources in to the final product with the customer, and that's what makes a matrix structure so so good in terms of doing the right things, in terms of a project and stuff. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. Divisional structure, well, what comes to mind is a company like Procter and Gamble. They've got it down to, health products, and they've got it cleaning products, and, so you can, it works through. The network structure is basically more around, an alliance where, you bring in various parties. They all have some common interest in getting something done, and then they work together, through a network. And that's a very flowing type of organization, and it will grow and contract based on the history of where the project is or the program. And then a team-based structure, again, about, teams are more about having leaders than managers, and working with the expertise of different peoples. And then a straight horizontal flat structure, and that's where, like a call center, you can have, like 500 people report to one person, because really what's tying this all together is the software, and measuring things and whatever, and making it allowable to be able to do things. Right, so that's what that's all about. So here's how in your activity for topic 4, how to kind of put this particular organizational chart together. If you want some help, you can go to this link, Smart Draw, and they'll show you how to do this as well. But essentially, what I'm looking for is basically the position, all right, inside that box, and then how it how these other positions report through that chart. All right, so I'll get back to that a little later, but now I'm going to talk about, again, form follows function. So we start with this, this strategy, okay, that's the function, and then we create this organizational structure to be more effective, and then inside of the operations, that organizational structure has an impact on how things get laid out. And you wouldn't believe, how the layout can improve efficiency and effectiveness, right? I remember, being at a conference in the college, and I was sitting around a bunch of chefs, and one chef was saying he worked in this one restaurant where the fridge was downstairs, and they'd have to go down and get these big pans of sauce, and it took them out of the kitchen, and these big pans of sauce would spill all over the stairs, and it gets slippery. So that layout was not ideal, right? So those are the kind of things that you want to put together to be able to do that. And what you need to think about, and again, you see this is highlighted in yellow, so it must be very important for a test question here, right? So understanding process layout versus product layout, right? So a process layout is similar items are grouped together, and I'll explain that a little more. They're ideal for companies that perform custom work. So say in a carpenter shop, you'll have all the saws in one area. You'll have all the planers in another area. You'll have all the layout in another area. That's a process layout, all right? But a product layout is where equipment, tools, and machines are located according to how a product is made. So if you're making vinegar, right, it's there's the different pieces are just subsequent as they go through. In most cases, there's some parallel to that, but one after the other, and that's because you can make it more efficient and more productive. Okay, so what you're looking at in process design is that when you need something, that's really that you need a lot of flexibility, like an appliance repair or an emergency room. That's probably the best example, where you're centered around the patient. I mean, you can't push the patient down an assembly line to get fixed, right? And so that's where you're gonna have a high variety and a lot of flexibility. So you're not gonna have as much efficiency as you could, versus when you're way down here and you're purifying water. You've got it's a technology and capacity balance that you're really getting down. So, but there's no flexibility. It's all set to standards, right? And there's no room for move around in case something happens, right? So that's the thing that you need to worry about. Now, what I want you to pay attention to, this is a really complicated drawing, but it's the impact of organizational structure on layout. So you can see that, having a jet, you can't move a jet down the assembly line. So it's a fixed, it's a fixed layout, right? But now, if you're in a, like a carpenter shop, it's a process. The saws are in one area, the planers are another area, the layout is another area. And then sometimes what you have is a cellular layout. And what that means is that there's, like a little hub, and you might have, 1 to 4 workers in that hub that can actually replace each other to do something to get it to a particular point. Then when you can hand it off to another cell as you go through. And then the product one is, an assembly line basically as you're going through. So that's the key information around what this is all about. You can see that it's highlighted, so it's pretty important to understand. So again, the fixed position process, you can see an operating room here. So the workers and equipment come to the site. It's limited space at the site, different materials required. Everything comes to the patient, right? And the volume of materials needed is dynamic, right? You don't know what's going to happen sometimes. So you need to be ready for, just improvising and that kind of thing. All right, here's the process-oriented thing. So I talked about, a carpenter shop. So, you'll have the table saws in one area. So all the sawing gets done. Then, all the drill pressing gets done. So it's flexible, capable of handling a wide variety of products or services. And then scheduling can be a little bit difficult because, if the product changes, well, then you need to make adjustments in each one of these areas of the layout. Okay. The cellular, I told you about that. It's mainly kind of a U shape. And again, one of the advantages of a U-shaped work cell is that you can have these people, trained on every station, and they can help each other or replace each other as it goes through. So it's a pretty cool way of having this out. So again, organizational structures, the process of developing or changing an organization structure, it involves the structure itself, the people itself, because it has to be engineered for the people, to be able to. I remember I had a friend going to school. He worked at one of the car manufacturers. He was like 6'6", and they had him stuck underneath a conveyor where he had to bend down all day. That doesn't work, right? So you gotta work towards the people, have the right technology, and then create the right environment for that. Okay. So again, you can see now I have a key here, right? So organizational structure based on behavior patterns. So the thing is, the degree of centralization depends on the behavior. So the thing is that, the more centralized, you have less contact, all right? But then you need more control, right? The least centralized, well, you need to be really close, to be able to help the people, through an intermediary or whatever. So understand this slide, going for test number 1. And then what is an organizational structure? Well, it's a backbone, right, of all the operating procedures and workflows at a company. So when we talk about structure, it's not just a desk is in the office. It's a desk in the office that has operating procedures and a certain workflow of going from one desk to the other. So that's all part of the definition of an organizational structure. And it allows every team member to be involved, right? And the thing is, you need to consider, where the business is in terms of its size, in its life cycle goals and its positioning. And I'll give you an example about that is that I had to do a business audit for a small manufacturing company, for one of the banks when I was in Ontario. And I went in and, hey, they got this great deal on this computerized a manufacturing machine that could it could punch out plates, at such an amazing low cost. But guess what? They had no room in the building. They brought it in, and it affected all their workflow, and so that it made it just crazy. So, those are the kind of things that you need to worry about. Okay, so how does this connect to triple bottom line? All right. So I've underlined these areas. So understand, how the creative thinking process works, how innovation works. You prepare, um, and then you create this concept, and then you incubate it. You step back and get your ideas in front of you, and then you put it into place, you put it into working. That's illumination, and then you test it. Does it fit your vision? So that's a sequence that you should be aware of. Okay. Okay. Again, I can't say enough about form follows function, right? So you're going to build this building, but why did you build that building? And you have these organizations that say, hey, we got a great deal on a building, and then they try to fit their own processes in that building, and in the long run, it doesn't work for them. So those are the kind of things that you need to think about. So for every organizational structure, there's some basic elements of structure design. So like for a functional structure, well, how much work specialization do you have? How much departmentation do you put together? What does the chain of command look like? What does the span of control look like? And I'm going to talk about these. What does, should you centralize or decentralize? How formal should that be? So for every one of these, you've got to go down these areas, and I'll define these pieces. Okay. So and you can see that this one's underlined. So this must be very important. All right, departmentalization. So those are the ones that I put in here. Right. All right. So let's talk about work specialization. So work specialization defines on how responsibilities are split. So somebody figured out on the assembly line, if they broke up the process into small steps that people could specialize in, well, then they could get very efficient, and then you could produce that a device or whatever in a very small amount of time for a high level of quality. So you got smaller work activities, assign digestible tasks to individuals who are going to be highly competent in that particular activity. All right. So the most common results of improper specialization is, if you don't have that, well, then you get burnout. You get people are overwhelmed on what they have to do, and they're not being very efficient. Right. So that's what work specialization does. It creates effectiveness and it creates efficiency. All right, so let's talk about chain of command. So what is chain of command? Well, it's a system for passing instructions and reporting within an organization. All right, so I'm an owner, I have one employee. All right, I have a one-to-one chain of command. All right, I have 3 employees. All right, and I interact individually with employee 1, employee 2, employee 3. That's still a one-on-one chain of command. But when the organization gets larger, then you have levels of management. All right, and now you're distributing that power and the learning and the accountability, and so that as you have a wider chain of command, then you're getting into inefficient territory. So I talked about unity command. You can see here, right, that this the unity command is there's a one-to-one relationship with all 3 employees, and then there's a one-to-one relationship from the next level with this particular person, right? So it's responsible for only one supervisor, who in turn is responsible to only one supervisor. And this comes into play when I talk about a matrix organization, because that's when it gets hairy. And I'll talk about what works and what doesn't work. All right. So that's what unity of command is. And then span of control, right, is how many people you have working for you and that report to you. So you can see that with a wide span of control, you have less time and energy to be able to do the one-on-one on each, with each one of these persons. But again, with covering the control part with technology, a control center might have 300 people reporting to one manager, but it can be done because the software is really looking after the performance. Okay. So again, a narrow span of control. Managers have fewer subordinates to supervise, and normally that's when there's high risk of loss or life, like in a nuclear program where something has to be done, really to tight standards. A wide span of control. You can see there's a key here, all right? So where you'll have is subject matter experts. So you have a general manager that's in a consulting agency and has 20 different types of consultants working on there, doesn't really understand the expertise that each one of those subject matter experts have. So again, they have less say in providing direction. They just got to rely on that expertise. And then a tall organization structure emphasizes a clear chain of command. That's more like the military and the fire service and that. And then the flat organization, well, it's a streamlined organization. A lot of entrepreneurs have a flat organization. Number one, because most of the employees are likely partners, they're motivated, and things happen, right? So you don't need middle people in between. So that's how that works. So understand what span of control really is. Just an aside, Genghis Khan, one of the most successful people in the world, conqueror, and he understood span of control, and he had a strict 10 to 1. So as soon as the platoon or whatever got bigger than 10, it wouldn't work, right? And that's how he could really control the effectiveness of the battle, right? So we learned from history, right? So span of control: number of employees a manager can effectively manage. Higher level managers have more unstructured problems, right? There's structured problems like, okay, how to put eavesdrops up. That's structured. Every eavesdrop installation has standard things. So you could manage a lot more people putting up eavesdrops. But now if you have somebody building software for a nuclear program, well, all of a sudden now that's more unstructured because some of it is proof of concept. You haven't even run it yet, all right? So that's unstructured. So you really kind of need a lot more attention to that, so that you'll have a smaller span of control, right? So small call centers, 50 customer service reps to 1, manufacturing, 40 production workers. So that's what span of control will do for you. So what you need to do, all right, is determine the appropriate span to be able to be efficient and effectiveness, doing the right things right, okay? So employee experience, the more trained, the larger the span. Similarity of tasks, the larger the span. Complexity of the test, smaller the span, right? Because now you've got more uncertainties. And the whole idea, you can see this is underlined here, the management style meets the employee preference, right? So what does the employee need to be able to do the job efficiently and effectiveness? And that's really what will drive, the scope of the span of control. Okay, so here, ancient Egyptian engravings limit the number of laborers 10 to 1 to one overseer. All right, so it's been around for a long time. And now we're going to talk about, you remember formalization came up in a highlight. So formalization is the degree to which jobs within the organization are standardized. Employee behavior is guided by rules and procedures. So if you work in a McDonald's kitchen, you have all these little buzzers going off, when to flip the hamburgers, when to pull things out of the microwave oven. right? And then when the formalization is low, well, you're dealing with unstructured problems, employee autonomy. So you need to rely on creativity and experience and capability of your employees because they're the ones kind of figuring it out as they go along because it's unstructured. You haven't done this before, and you haven't standardized it. So, it's a new product that you're building, those kind of things. And something else, this is a definition that you should be aware of, a gangplank plank. So what you have is, you have an organization next to another organization that's working together, and you allow different people at different levels, to be able to talk to each other, to interact and transfer information, right? So it refers to the arrangement as two managers working at the same level. B&E say, can communicate with each other directly for quick communication. And that's where, you can transfer technology and everything else. Now, there's different types of bureaucracy. And that's something that, you should be aware of. And you can see that what's highlighted here is mock bureaucracy. And this is an interesting type of bureaucracy. So it's rules imposed by outsiders, rarely enforced and often violated. So no smoking in the mine. So there'll be health experts that say you shouldn't smoke in the mine. There'll be safety experts that say, well, you shouldn't smoke in the mine because you're working with explosives. But there's no tight policing of it, right? And so that it's sort of a mock bureaucracy. But then you have a representative bureaucracy. Well, like a union. The union now. If smoking is a risk to the employees in the mine, the union rep will make sure that those safety rules are enabled by the company and go after the company, and enabled or satisfied, by the workers. And then there's some punishment centers. So you do something wrong, you get punished. You go down the road and you go through a speed trap, you get a ticket. All right. So that's how it works. Okay, so one of the management tools, right, that comes out of managing principles is one of the most effective ones that I've ever used, and it's called the McKinsey 7S framework. And it's one way to evaluate the capability of an organization better than most of them out there, right? And so what you're looking at, you start with the culture and what are the core values, that tie that culture together. And that core culture has an effect on every aspect of an organization. And so that you evaluate the strategy, the structure, the systems. Is the structure compatible with the strategy? Is the system compatible with the strategy in terms of delivering on the type of quality or whatever? And does it work well with the structure? The skills, and the skills mainly here are what we call competencies, all right? So that if you have what we call core competencies, those are core skills that give you competitive advantage. So let's say that, Gorilla Glue, all right? So, the people that have developed Gorilla Glue probably have some key inside knowledge of adhesion that is an absolute core competency that gives Gorilla Glue, a competitive advantage in the marketplace. They've got a skill in knowing how to make that Gorilla Glue better than anybody else's glue, right? And then the style, and we talked about management style. Style is about what kind of a style you adapt in the management. So I mean, if you're in the military, well, likely you need a directive style because there's no time to be able to discuss what should be done, when the enemy appears, right? You have to execute. And so you need a directive style, versus, participative style, where, you're trying to solve a problem at Google, all right? And then staff is that you're putting the right people in the right positions with the right competencies, and that's the whole idea around, McKinsey 7S framework. The STAR model, developed by Jay Galbraith, by the way, here he puts these aspects together and the structure of that organization determines the placement of power and authority in the organization based on that. So from processes, you need information. For rewards, you're doing motivation. The people, you need skill sets and mindsets. Direction for the strategy, power for the structure. So again, those 4 areas of structure policy. We talked about specialization. We talked about shape. We're going to talk about distribution of power, and then we talked about departmentalization. So you need management power in certain levels of management to be able to get things done. So you need accountability and you need power, right? So formalization, what extent business processes, policies, and job descriptions are standardized. This is the foundation of total management quality. In TQM, we call formalization in a lot of cases standard methods, and we develop these standard methods, and we measure that they're being done properly, and we insist, and that's what drives quality and efficiency and effectiveness. Okay, so there's a difference between centralization and decentralization, right? And that defines how managers as well as employees give input to or satisfy company goals and strategy. So from the centralization, leaders have the ultimate control. When you get into decentralization, especially in the highly customer-oriented interface, the people at the front line need the capability to be able to adjust to the customer so that they will have a lot more power than, say, someone in the police service. Police service, a police person has to execute according to particular standards and the command that was given, whereas people on the front line in a very intimate service setting has capability to be able to make some adjustments and those kind of things. So that's the kind of difference between centralization and decentralization. So you can see, this is for centralized, it's a very, vertical structure, and for decentralized, you can see that the leadership is spread around the actual structure itself. Okay, so ensure greater control over business processes. Centralized can do that, and you can see how that's done. But the biggest drawback is the amount of decision time making. Everything has to go up and down the ladder to make key decisions. And in today's world, especially with business cycles being so short, sometimes you'll miss an opportunity, right? So you need a certain amount of decentralization. So that's what that's all about. So here's a decentralized organization, and this one here is basically a geographical one, and you can see that someone in the Northeast region. Well, let's just look at it. The customers in Ontario are much different, than the customers in Alberta. And so there needs to be a certain amount of flexibility to adapt to the competition and to the client preferences. So decentralization brings some coordinated challenges because what you tend to get then you tend to get duplication of resources. Like you've got several manufacturing operations where if you had one, you'd be a lot more efficient. But again, it's the yin and yang, right? It's the balance between, do you want to be truly responsive, and or do you need to be fixed to lock on to the whatever are the risks and the things that are important, the safety of what's going on. So that's you're always trading that up. So big and long-term issue in business, especially in the organizations, is growing in scale and scope. So what I'm talking about there is that centralization is the degree to which decision-making is concentrated at a single point. That could be a disadvantage, and a lot of times decentralization, degree to which the lower level employee provides input and actually makes decision. And then And then you look at employee empowerment, more authority to employees to make decisions. So a lot of times, in a centralized organization, people will just go through the motions, because if they go off track, they might get penalized for it. So those are the kind of things you need to deal with. And what I found in my own experience is that, when you're working in a small organization, you can decentralize, because there's not that many people. Everybody understands what the game plan is, and you're going through. As you get larger, then you need to start building quality and standardization into to make sure that a McDonald's hamburger is the same in Ontario as it is in Vancouver, right? Those kind of things. So those are the things that you're working with. But in some cases, you can start as centralized, and then you move to decentralized, and then all of a sudden, at a certain particular size, it's not working for you. So you got to come back a little bit to centralization, because the market has changed, or the preferences have changed, or the economies of scales have changed, or the economies of scope. So it's not the answer is it depends, I guess. Okay. So here's a little bit here just to understand this. If you need to be responsiveness, well, decentralization will give you immediacy. But if you need to be reliable, well, centralization will make sure that all the bodies comply to make sure that the standards are assured. If you're looking at efficiency, well, centralization really kind of gets you into syndication, which is you're standardizing each operation that's getting a centralized command. And then if you have to be continuous, well, then centralization will in some ways, as you're doing this for a long time, people are saying, why do we need to listen to these people in Vancouver? They don't understand our business. So you get into you get into some of that detachment. So that's what that's about. But here's in yellow that you need to be worried about. All right, decision making. So centralized, it's one body of management decides procedures, develops strategies, creates policies, particularly important during a crisis. Decentralized, management at every level make decisions for their department and teams. All right, they're being more responsive. Okay. All right. So contingency variables affect structural choice. Now, contingency means, it depends. All right. So top managers typically think long and hard about which structure will work best. And so, if these are contingency factors, then this is the most appropriate structure. So you look at a mechanistic organization, and again, mechanistic is, sort of, it almost bureaucratic in a sense, or a military organization, or let's say a moon project, for a rocket. It needs to be tightly controlled, and you need to have high specialization, because it's a complex thing. So that means then you need some rigid departmentalization. So that's close, and a clear chain of command, and narrow spans of control, and centralized, and high formalization means a lot of standards in place. So you see how that it depends in terms of what is it that you're trying to do. Form follows function, right? So the organic organization, organic means it can evolve, highly adaptive and flexible. So you need a lot of collaboration, right? Both vertical and horizontal. Everybody needs to be talking to each other, and sharing information together to make sure that they're on track, and so that the duties are adaptable. There's informal communication. There's few rules, because you don't want to disadvantage creativity and innovation, right, to a certain extent, right? And then it's decentralized, and you'll have wider spans of controls, because you've got different experts that are clearly subject matter experts that have this expertise that nobody else has, and you need to give them the flexibility, but yet everybody has to work together. So that's kind of the difference between these two. And so that you need to understand this, Oh, this must be a test question, right? Mechanistic versus organization. So it's an organization that has rigid, tightly controlled, and organic, an organization that is highly adaptive, right? And so we just covered all that. So here's sort of a good example. So McDonald's, highly mechanistic, right? Anybody can go in there and learn how to, work in the back kitchen, within half a day because it's all controlled, right? And run by timers and tight processes and everything else. The tasks are well defined. Employees follow clear instructions and role. Decision making, there's no other way to make a McDonald's hamburger than the way that's described. Whereas Google, all right, you need to be flexible, decentralized. The company values creativity, adaptability. They're always looking at how can we make this operation better, faster, more creative, and now in the advent of AI, you can see how AI is starting to be integrated into the Google search and everything else. So a lot of decentralized decision making, very fluid roles that change with project needs because, oh yeah, there's a new area here. We should explore this because we might be able to, integrate this into our methods around AI, open communication, collaborative culture, high level of innovation and adaptability. So that's a really key example of doing that. So let's talk about the types of organizational structure. Okay, so functional, based on work specialization. So functional, you could have operations, you could have, HR, you can have accounting, you can have treasury, right? Those are functions. Divisional, we could either organize it, along a product line or products themselves because they're so vastly used in the marketplace, or geography. Remember, I showed you an organization that had regions, right? Team-based, that's a group that serves particular goals, functions, contains leaders and workers. A flat hierarchy, that's mainly an entrepreneurial organization where everybody's got a stake in the success of the organization. So they're self-motivated and they're a subject matter expert in their own right. And so that one person could manage all these because they're all being incentivized the same way and all that stuff. And then the matrix, and I'm going to give you an example of that matrix on another slide. Employees work in multiple departments with multiple superiors. All right. And that's where, they say that, you can only serve, one master. Well, that's where that comes in. So the 7 types of organizational structures: functional, divisional, matrix, team, network, hierarchical, flat organization. So we've covered those off. There's a functional one. You can see that, marketing is its own entity, production is its own entity. The divisional one, you can see where now this is done geographically, but there's a lot of excuse me, a lot of redundancy, right? They all have their own HR departments. They all have their own finance. That costs money, right? So, the answer, it depends. It weighs on, how important is it for competitiveness and customer response in a region, to be in a divisional structure or just a straight central one. Okay, types of departments. You can see that there's different types of departments. And then here's, product departmentalization. You can see Procter and Gamble. I mean, look at, baby products, health, beauty, food, and then the administration. And then here's a structure of a production thing that's it's more along the lines now because it's specializing in a particular product. So here's this matrix structure. You can see that there's a product manager A. He or she will be running a product, and they'll get a particular worker from retail, all right? And that person has a boss in retail, but now product manager is the boss of that person here on that. They'll get an engineer from the engineering department. Well, that person has a boss in the engineering department, and then product A manager is their boss. You can see that works. But I'll tell you, like I've worked in many matrix structures. Most of them worked really well. A few actually failed because, in some cases, in one of the cases, the manager of the team um, was a adversary of someone in the engineering department, and also someone in the engineering department. The head of the engineering department didn't like the head of the marketing department, so wanted to make sure that this person, made sure that marketing didn't get their own way. All right, so that it really could be messy, but in most cases works really well. Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna let you read that stuff there. Here's the team structure. Uh, Apple, Cisco, Google, Whatfix, all these new organizations, they're a project management organization now. It's all teams because they're all going in many directions, creating and developing new areas of business, new products, and team members are responsible for managing their workload and have full control over the project. And that's the way to go. And that's why, again, why did I introduce the team, learning team charter? Is because to understand how to work with other people, because that's really where the world is moving to. Network structure, you can see that it goes far beyond the internal company. A core company might contract a distribution company to distribute their projects, or may contract a certain consultant to solve a problem, and then once that problem's solved, they're not contracted anymore. So typically a network organization outsources mean going outside of their corporate piece. All right. And again, to hire independent contractors or vendors that complete work. And again, I always kind of maintain this, is that even in my own career, I gradually evolved from working for a company to an inside consultant to an outside consultant. And I think we're all heading that way. We're going to be our own companies, at the end of the day, because of, the fluidness of the economy in today's world. Okay, hierarchy, most common organizational structure type that follows a direct chain of command, right? Going through, senior manager has total control of what's going on. And then a flat organization, you can see that there's few middle managers, but this is what I call, the white space, all right? The white space between a manager and an employee. And white spaces now are managed by software, right? And it's getting more and more controlling that way as well. And so what'll happen is, if it's done right, and the employees are still have some morale left, they could build large organizations, with this white structure, white space being managed by different software and things like that. Okay, so here's another piece that you better understand, in terms of the test. Understand that, essentially, there's three levels of management. I mean, there are more, but in terms of categories. So there's the upper management level, the middle management level, and the lower management level. All right. And again, in the lower management level, there are mainly line managers. Something you should know, all right? Research that I've done is that the biggest area of trust in an organization is between the employees and the lower level manager. That's where the trust really gets manifested. All right. And if the middle management and the upper management don't understand that, and don't give, line managers what they need to be able to give them the right information and the right support, then trust will never be, a currency in that organization. All right. Okay. So the thing is, just understand that there are three levels, and then understand then that the activities of the organization change based on the based, and I think we took this right on topic one. You can see that when you're at the top, you're doing a lot more planning and a lot less leadership, from working in the employees. Whereas at the supervisory management, in terms of production and marketing, this is where it all happens. So you got to understand the differences, all right? And then where they kind of break down. So that's important. Okay, so line and staff authority. So line managers, they're responsible for essential activities, production, sales. Staff managers work in supporting activities. So an IT manager, they're support. An HR manager, they're support. Let's not worry about Philip Selznick right now, but FAIL's organization pyramid, yeah, you better understand what FAIL's all about, in terms of what's going on. So functional growth, employees added to perform functions. All right, that's horizontal, so functions. And then scalar growth, adding to layers of supervision. So, as the organization gets larger, then you need, more levels of supervision. And Field talks about that gangplank. So this supervisor E can talk to this O supervisor, and I showed you that in the earlier piece. Power authority, ability to influence decisions, authority of the position, authority of the leadership, right? Greater authority leads to greater power. Can have power without, a position. So understand what that is. The power comes from the top. But here's what I found in organizations. In a lot of them, their staff people, even could be the janitor, has a lot of thought power. A lot of influence with workers because they're thought leaders. Okay. And understand that dynamic, even though that person may report to you, they may be a big influence on your workforce, right? So you need to understand that piece as well. Okay. Notice there's no yellow here. This is more for your information, but there's different types of power. Legitimate, that comes with the position. You have the chance to reward people, so that gives you power. If you're an expert in some areas, I know, I worked in the process side, the company used to bring in experts and we listened to them because they knew better, right? They had all that experience. Referent, meaning, thought leader, and they're charismatic and those things. And then coercive, somebody says, oh, you don't do this, you don't get your bonus, all right? So those are different types of power. We're going to take this later on. I don't know why I threw this one in here at this time, but this is what they call, a value chain. Michael Porter, not so important in test number 1, but definitely in test number 2 and 3, right? So that's what to worry about. Okay, not going to talk about that. Okay, so here we are. The network. When COVID came on the scene, it was really kind of we were using remote services and all that, and it stuck. All right. And then it's driven by global training, because now an expert might be in South Africa that you would contract for a specific job, whereas if you brought somebody in Red Deer, Alberta, then you'd have to build them an office. You'd have to buy a computer for them, those kind of things. So network organizations are really becoming good. Pros and cons of outsourcing, from my strategic planning perspective, you never outsource your core competence. Your core competence is what gives you competitive advantage. And if you outsource that, you're really training somebody to compete with you. All right. So don't just hire to hire, access to more talent, when if you do outsource, you don't have to hire, but again, you don't have control, and then you risk, especially if they can sense what your core competencies are, you're going to lose some competitive advantage. Okay. I'm not going to talk about too much there. Here's one. Beware of issuing titles in new growing organizations. I've lived this one, right? So what happens is, you're in a startup company, and you don't have very many people because you can't afford it, because you're trying to get established in the market. So you might bring someone in and you say, okay, you know what? You're the head of production and you're the head of marketing, right? And then you give them a title of vice president, production and marketing, right? Then 5 years later, the organization is so big that one person can't handle it all, right? And you decide that, hey, well, I'm going to bring in a vice president of marketing. So that person says, hey, what am I? Am I like, Miss Meat here? I put in my 5 years and now you're taking away some of my capability. So the fact is, just don't give them titles. Just tell them what they have to do and let them understand that at some point in time, they're going to be specializing a little more because the organization is going to get bigger. So I just thought I'd share that with you. It's a common problem for entrepreneurs. Okay. Again, choosing an organization structure type, it has to do with the strategy, it has to do with the size, it has to do with the process design. Is it a batch operation? Is it continuous? It has to do with the environment. So those are all the kind of things that you need to take a look at, right? And here's where, the McKinsey 7S that I talked about, here's where that comes in. Um, Not too much yellow on here, so I'm just going to move through this. Okay, so any questions at all? We're at the end of topic 4. No questions? I did a lot of talking here. Okay, so just for people that aren't present and are watching this video, what's going to happen now is we're going to take a break. So you're going to see the video flatline for 10 minutes, and then we're going to come up and then start talking about topic 5. Okay, so I'm just going to shut down the computer. I'm going to come back at 2:30, right? And then we're going to cover topic 5. Meanwhile, people who are attending, if you have some questions, fill up the chat space, and I can answer those questions as well. Okay. All right. Can I see a thumbs up? I'll see you in 9 minutes. Okay. Thanks. Okay, we're back. Can you hear me? Okay, so Brad, you had a question, and what I did is I pulled up, this is what the posting looks like, for the true colors, and you can see that there's a PDF here. So you click on that PDF, and this is what you get. You get this color self-assessment, and then you fill that out, with these scores, and then you actually put your, what the blue score is, the gold score, and the orange score, and the green score, all right? And then the total of the four scores will equal 80, but the color with the highest score is your personal color, all right? So say this one was 80, well, that, the rest are smaller than, I'm sorry, yeah, then you'd be absolute gold. So does that make sense? Can you just, is there anything else you want to know? You can unmute and ask me the question. Okay. Can you guys hear me? Okay, thanks. Okay, so let's okay, so we're going to start topic 5 commentary. Okay, let's go here. Okay. Okay. Okay, so operations is a big part of, where the management really, the rubber hits the road, so to speak, where it becomes relevant is that's where, all this theory that translated into principles, that translated into tools, now is translating into infrastructure and process and the way things go. All right. So that's really key. All right. And that's where we're going to start. But let me just remind you again, you can see under this blue piece, these are your main important things for test number 1. I just wanted to review that, right? Okay, I just let Terrence back in here. Okay, so these are the key things. So make sure for test number 1, you do go through these Robbins or Pearson Revel Robbins presentations. They have key information that really rounds out, what's going to be on the test. Right, there's no doubt about it. And then look at, the yellow comments, the keys, the bolded statements. And this is where you're truly going to find out what's going on. So these two are absolutely key to study for the topic. Then go through, you don't have to do every one of those tests to get a feel for what those tests look like in the practice tests. And then just go back on reviewing, what you did for the participation activities. And again, look at your assignment 2 and, those key theorists around Henry Fayol, Chester Barnard, Henry Mintzberg, Charles Spalding, and Frederick Taylor, because there's likely going to be a couple of questions around that, affiliated with that, not necessarily, all the specifics of those theorists, but, what did they contribute to? All right, those kind of things. Okay, again, I don't want to go through this again, but let's talk about AI. And why I want to bring this up is that your assignment number 3 is due on May the 27th. But I'd like you to start thinking about that. Here's an article I just pulled out, on my Flipboard. It was published in February. And look at this, the Microsoft AI CEO predicts that specific jobs that will be replaced by AI within the next 18 months. It's there. It's there for us. And then this is a link if you want to get to it. But the thing is that this assignment here, I hope, that I designed to be able to get you ready for what's going on. You're likely, things are going to change. They're changing so fast that you're get ready for it. Look at where your chosen career field is going to be and explore how it's going to be affected by AI. And the thing you need to remember is you may not get replaced by AI, but you may get replaced by someone who knows how to use AI. So I'm saying there's all kinds of training out there, and get on it and be able to complement what you're doing. All right. Another commercial. Okay. So here, just and these are stats that I collected last year, but the market growth is amazing. The compound annual growth is like 38% of AI investment and innovation. 45 billion invested in 2023 alone in North America. The workforce, AI technologies could automate around 30% of work activities by 2030. And then the ethical focus. And that's where this empathy comes in the new management aspects of theory and principles. If we don't care, we're going to be in big trouble because I think this is the next slide. Yeah. All right. So there's AI as a tool, that you could use, and you can control that. But AI as an agent, and I just watched the show with my wife on a William Shatner show about where robotics are going and whatever, and how they're even looking at now giving robots a conscience. When that happens, they're an agent. They'll be doing what they think is best for them. So you got to understand where we're going with this. It could go right out of control, and that's where you need ethics, right? That's where you need social conscience. That's where you need empathy, right? So, and that's where those management principles have to be when you get there. Another helpful hint, hopefully, I read this book, changed my life. This guy, James Clear, if you get on his news letter, you can just Google his name and get on his newsletter, and you'll get bits and bytes every week about what's in this Atomic Habits, but they're amazing. Okay, so here's the deliverables for, I say topic 5 now. All right, so there's 3 surveys that you have to do, and then there's a process that you'll have to create, based on building a gingerbread house. And what I want you to do is that, again, process is so related to structure, and wherever you go, you're going to go. If you've got good, strong, robust process, you've got good management control. And so the more you can learn how to use process flow diagrams, I mean, the more equipped you are to, no matter where you're working. You could be working in a bakery, you could be working in a law office, you could be working in an accounting firm. And if you got good process, then you've got good control, and chances are you've got good customer outcomes, right? And what I want you to do is I want you to use at least one of these icons, at least one. You can use 2 or 3 or whatever, to be able to, feel how to make this work, and then now I'm going to explain these as we go on later on. The second do is labor productivity, and I want to show you a slide about where labor productivity is in Canada. It's dismal, right? And so if you're going to be a good manager, you want to understand labor productivity in any field that you're in. If you want to make an impact, if you can improve the labor productivity, you're going to improve profitability, you're going to improve sustainability of the business itself, all those kind of things. And the thing is don't be alarmed. There's these calculations I show you in a table, similar calculations, so you don't have to try to understand how these formulas work. Just emulate them, to the real numbers that you're working on. All right, so don't get too afraid about what you have to do here. Now, what comes into mind? And this is, now we're talking about test number 2. Chapter 13 is a very instructional channel for the, Pearson Revel approach here. And it defines operations management, the nature and purpose of the value chain. We're going to do a lot about value chains. We're going to talk about, Michael Porter a lot. He was the father of that. And that's a key area in management capability. describe how that value chain management is done, and discuss, some contemporary and thing is that in my other corporate lives, I dealt a lot with supply chain management, and if you don't understand, the value chain, then you won't understand supply chain management. All right. So what is operations management? Okay. So what it is that there's a transformation that goes through. Sometimes, just the people itself get transformed in producing a service. Sometimes they use technology, and that transforms something in the process to give you a good or service, right? Equipment, that adds in the transformation. So what you're doing is you're taking inputs and you're creating a value. That's what you're doing. So you got to understand that process, all right? Converts resources like labor, raw materials into goods and services that are sold to customers, but you're creating value, right? Okay, so manufacturing organizations, they produce physical goods. Service organizations, they're non-physical, but they're in the form of services. So here's just a slide, what's a service? Well, production and consumption happen at the same time. So you hire a landscaper and you're watching them work, and they're building, your backyard as you're watching them. All right. Whereas a good, well, you buy a glass, like a water glass. It's done. It's in inventory, right? So that's kind of the difference. And where we are now, if we're looking at the perspective, we're in the classical end, so we're going to look at, the different perspectives of the classical contributors, and then, as we go through the course, we're moving down this continuum here, okay? So form follows function, right? So here's a function, and then, the form follows it. So, they call that the form follows function onion model. So you create something, what is it? Why are you doing it? How are you doing it? When? And then you'll create a structure for that. And then I talked about layout, right? So you'll lay out an area, and in that layout, then you have process and workflow and policies. This is all part of your structure, all right? That's the form part. And then you have metrics, key performance indicators, all right? And so that what you're trying to do then is that you're trying to change the behaviors, doing the right things right. The right things, effectiveness, right? Efficiency, right? That's where we're going. Okay, so just to show you, in today's world, and I've done a lot of operations management. I've worked in operations management. I've taught operations management, and there's all these aspects of operations management, from forecasting that could make or break you. Like if you're in sales and you under forecast, then what happens? Everybody goes to your competitor and they never come back for the product that you're making, or you over forecast and you're stuck with inventory in your organization, and you're losing all kinds of profits because of the cost of holding inventory. Capacity planning, scheduling, production processes, quality assurance, all of these. Look at this, managing your inventory. Inventory could make up 35 to 65% of your product unit costs. So if you don't manage your inventory, man, you're going to go out of business. All right. Employee motivation. So that's where you get productivity, fulfillment, employee satisfaction. It's so you do training. That's all part of operations management. Location of facilities. All right, so you make Calgary hockey jerseys, right? And you're located in New Brunswick. That's a big deal. You got to spend all those fuel dollars to get those jerseys to Calgary. So where you locate, that has a big thing. Buying materials in terms of using the supply chain. So this has, I try to show you how important operations management is in relation to, managing overall. Okay, and just a little bit about the Canadian economy. Look at over the years how, our Canadian economy, we're an economy of services, all right? It's a service economy. So if you're looking for a job, you'll probably have a lot more job security if you look at, an up and coming service that that it's going to be in demand over the next 20 years. Okay. So how are we getting you ready? we're going to show you how to put a business process flow chart together, okay, which is part of, again, the structure of management going through. And, we're going to show you how important productivity is. And we're going to measure output versus, what you've put into that in terms of a worker and in terms of materials and everything else. Okay, so here's something that's pretty important. You can see that it's part of the activity 5A step. So you need to identify what types of transformations are going on when you're building that, that little house, all right? So, you're making something, there's a physical thing. Exchange, while you're selling it, yeah, there's something else there. So those are two right off the bat. So I want you to kind of look at that and say, which types of transformations does your gingerbread house encase or go across? And then what you need to do is look at value added. And again, in step 3, I want you to calculate value added in terms of dollars. So how much did it cost you to produce that, with materials and production? And then what are you selling it for? So what you're selling it for minus that gives you value add in dollars, all right? So that's part of, step 3 going through. So why are we covering all this? Why? Well, if you understand transformation, you can calculate productivity. If you understand productivity, then you can calculate profitability. If you can increase productivity, well, then you develop what they call comparative advantage, or which affects how much that we sell as a nation. And then by increasing productivity and comparative advantage, we increase our standard of living, which translates into an increase in quality of life. So this is it. This is the path of life going on. But here's the kicker, all right? Look, I just pulled this article here. TD Economists report from bad to worse in Canada's productivity. I mean, look at how it's going. You can access that article. So if you come back to where you're going and you want a job in management, you better understand productivity, because that's what's going to keep you in business, and that's what's going to keep the country sustainable, to be able to to grow the gross domestic product, right? So that's key. So value added, additional features or economic value. It adds a product service, helps companies attract more customers. Effectively, it's the difference between a product's price and the consumer's cost of producing it. Price to consumer and the cost of producing it, and value can be added in many, many ways. And sometimes there's perceived value, and that's where marketing comes in. And if you've got a rock star advertisement process where you can convince customers that your product is much more valuable than the competitors, you can add more money to that price and make more profit, right? Okay, so here's where the transformation conversion process comes into place. We talked about that physical, locational, blah, 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 right? And the value added difference between the cost of inputs, being, material and labor and that, and the value price of the output. So, you're going to put this together in that activity. And again, just understand, you have inputs, you have a transformation process, and you have outputs. In some cases, it's just skills and resources. In other cases, it's instructions, and then materials and things like that. And that's really, again, when you do this process flow chart, what you're putting together. So how do businesses improve productivity? And we're going to ask you that. What did you do? Like what's the result of you improving productivity for your your little house that you're making, right? Profits can increase, employees can receive higher wages, companies can offer more competitive prices. And the thing is, productivity is a mix between people and operational variables, right? So you got to focus on both of them. Okay, so again, look at highlighting division of labor. Must be a test question, right? So division of labor is the separation of a work process into a number of tasks. We talked about that in the in the actual process part of the stuff that we looked in topic 4. But here's an assembly line, and there's you're breaking down the task so you can have higher quality, better reliability, better cost, and end game, the whole thing. All right. So by doing the division of labor, you're breaking up production process into small tasks so that each worker performs a small portion of the overall job. All right. Okay. So here's all the benefits: increased efficiency, higher productivity, innovation and improvement, economies of scale, interdependence. Specialization often leads to increased interdependence amongst workers and industries, skill development. So those are all the things. And then why do we do this? Well, clarity and understanding. But the best way you can train people is if you have a map in front of them, right? A process flow diagram. This is how the business works. They can get to see how things interact, the interrelations. They can see what the end game is. They can see, where the important parts of the production process is. So you'll improve communications that way. You can identify bottlenecks or the root cause because you've got this thing in front of you. And oh, by the way, I spent a lot of time in business process engineering. I ran a $60 million process improvement operation team, at TELUS, where we looked at the whole service delivery process. And oh, by the way, in some places, we pulled out 40% of the costs because now the workers in that process understood, what they could do to improve it, right? So this isn't just, something to read about. It's doable, right? And then process improvement. So you optimize and you get better quality, and you create. Why create it? You do training and onboarding with it. You can get compliances. You'll help decision making, and then it's the best thing in project management. Okay, so what are you doing then? You're going to determine the main components of this process. What are the steps, to be able to create this this house? All right, this little house that you're going to make. Okay, and then then you're going to arrange those activities in the right order, and then you're going to choose at least each one of these icons to create that process with. All right. You're going to make those connections. So you got to show the lines and arrows going through them. You got to indicate the beginning and the end of the process. Okay. You start there, you stop there. So there's circles that, both ends of the process. You got to review your business process diagram, and you're going to step back and review the flow chart and make sure that it accurately represents that process. Check for missing steps, those kind of things. All right. So basic steps, so I'm helping you out here, right? The basic steps in building a gingerbread house, here's the steps to use. You're going to choose the design. You're going to create a bill of materials. You're going to purchase the materials. You're going to prepare patterns. You're going to make gingerbread dough. You're going to cut and bake pieces. You're going to make royal icing. You're going to assemble a house. You're going to decorate. You're going to package that house, and then you're going to sell that house. So there's at least 11 main steps, in that piece, and you're going to make a drawing because of that. And oh, by the way, when you're doing group work, protocol is that when someone uploads that in your group, everyone has a say in what happened, and they have a sign off and that they agree that that's the product that your group has made. All right. And that's just a main thrust of project management. And the more that you can bring that into play and practice, the more training that you'll get as you leave this organization. Okay, so here's a typical process flow diagram. So again, the circle starts it, and you got to review the menus. This is a decision block, so you're going to decide where you're going to do this. You're going to get friends to order. Oh, now you got another decision box. And if the answer is not right, maybe you're going to start over again. All right. See how that goes for decision boxes. And then you're going to order and pay. And then, you're going to stop here. All right. So every one of these process symbols, and the process. So potential failure point. Well, if you're going to cook the thing, and you're going to overheat it, and you're going to burn them, right? So I want you to kind of know about that piece. And then you're going to create the business flow diagram. You're going to identify those inputs. You're going to identify the value added. So that value added, that's a cost thing again, So what did it cost you in terms of labor and materials and stuff, and versus the price? So price that you charge the customer minus what it cost you, that's your value added. So you're going to do that in a dollar a piece. Okay. So this kind of these are the main overall steps that I just went through. And the thing is that it's, and I know that, with the test and everything else, if this slides a little bit in terms of due date, I'm not going to panic too much, right? But just don't let it go too long. Right. There's the pieces. And now we're going to go into 5B. So you're going to use these parameters to calculate labor productivity and material productivity. Now I give you all the inputs, all right? So you've consulted with your customers and you decided to charge them $3. So you know what that cost is. You'll only need 3-gram wafers, 10 cents each. So you add that up. It will only take you one worker to build this house for 2 minutes of labor, at 33 cents a minute. And then you show your calculations, but big time, you show your units, right? Because that's what's really going to help you understand what you did and then provide, more clarity when you try to do this again. All right. Okay. And then you consult with the example that I created for you. So, here's where, units of output per labor minute, value of output per value of labor, so this is dollars, right? Calculate the material productivity, value of output per value of materials. So again, let's go to the example. Here's another process that's outlined to give you, and this is on slide 37 of the Blackboard slide deck that I've given you. And I just wanted to let you know what a concurrent activity is. So you can see as you're going along here, you might have other activities that go on at the same time, right? And that's a concurrent activity. And you'll see that in a lot of process drawings. Okay, so here's 5B. Show your formulas, identify your units, show your calculations. This will prepare your team for the group cupcake assignment. So here's all the facts and figures, and then you're going to calculate the labor productivity, units of output per labor minute output, the number of, sometimes it might be, the number of output, it might be 2/3 of a gingerbread house, just so you know that. And the value of output, well, how much did you pay? How much did you sell it for? And then what did it cost you in terms of labor? So please pay attention to these units and then calculate material productivity. All right. So here's where I did it, where I use different figures, but you can see that if you follow, what I'm asking you to do and maybe put it in the same table, then you can figure out all this stuff, using the numbers that I gave you to calculate it for. So, it's not going to be too much of a uncertainty of how you do this. I'm showing you the formula. I'm showing you the units. I'm showing you, the unit of labor, and then you're putting in the costs, based on what you did. Okay. And then you get it down to, what's the material productivity? You can see what I use with my example, what I came up with. And this is dollars of output, and then material productivity and output per $1 of material, right? So again, that's why, and you can see here, you see that, the output, well, this was just a fraction of a gingerbread house, right? So in some other cases, it might be 2 gingerbreads for every dollar, depending on the numbers that you use. And then you look at the link between productivity and people, planet and profit sort of thing. So there's other ways of calculating value, the total measure of productivity, how much energy did you put into this? The total measure of productivity in people, what did this mean to the quality of life index? The total measure of productivity in terms of environment, what does it mean in terms of the carbon footprint? So you can create indices, to link in, this triple bottom line piece. Okay, well, you'd have to know anything about in the test about this? No, but I wanted you to see where you can take it in terms of management pieces. This is just an example of what I did. I actually worked with Mac Hall Mobility, and we went in and we took 3 hours, and we took a look at how they sold like a wheelchair to a person, and we broke these down into swimming lanes. And by the time we left, they had a better idea of how they can improve things, right? And the light bulb came on, and they're just they're retail people, never worked in a production operation, but once they saw this on paper and now they can train their people, going through, it's just amazing, on what came out of that. And then this is unrelated, I guess, but we're going to talk about that a few times. Here's where, you got to be where the customer is, and where they are in their journey, in terms of, okay, they purchase, but, how can you get to their purchase? Well, through an agent or broker. Or loyalty. Well, how can you keep connected with those guys? Well, a loyalty program or email or a newsletter, those kind of things. So understand that there's different types of productivity measurement, going on. But here's something really important to know. Total productivity, calculating by dividing outputs, total outputs produced by a company by the total inputs used in its production. So those are the common inputs, those are common outputs. And then you could break it down. Some people want to know what their productivity is with all factors, together, that's total productivity, or maybe just one factor. In terms of, wanting to know, in terms of the space that you use, the real estate, that would be one factor of productivity. How well did you do for that? So some people know, hey, you know what? We're producing $3 of product a day for 1 square foot of warehouse or manufacturing space. Those are the kind of things. That's why this comes in, and that's really what I'm talking about is partial productivity. One class of inputs or factors. Okay, but here's the main ones to look at, and now I'll just talk about emerging technologies. Because of productivity and whatever, but Internet things. What the Internet things are, I just wanted you to know about that. There's a thing called intelligent farming now, right? And what's intelligent farming? Well, they have sensors in the ground that will measure pH. They have sensors in the air that will measure pollution and measure the quality of the air and temperature and wind. And they'll have all kinds of different sensors. And these sensors, that they make up the Internet of Things. They're doubling annually. So now, a farmer can know exactly, where his or her yield is going, and what needs to be done to improve production. So it's an amazing area, where AI and sensors are coming into play. Okay, don't want to talk to you about that. But let's look at levels of automation. All right. So you can see here that if the okay, if okay, you could see where you have fixed automation. You can develop high qualities of and like high numbers of automation. With what I'm gonna there's no questions on the test. I'm gonna get a better explanation for this as we go along. Okay. Again, the best thing you can do is review the theorists and theories. I mentioned some, but I say that it's definitely a requirement for test number 2. I'd go through this piece one more time for test 1 as well. Okay. And not so much about Lewins, but Frederick Winston Taylor, that he's pretty important, with the principles of scientific management. Henry Gantt, not so much in test 1, but test 2, yeah. And we're going to learn about the Gantt chart. Actress, not so much. Okay, and these are just extra pieces here. Okay, so that's it. So sorry about this comment on the slide here. I think it's misrepresented, and that's why I don't want to talk to it. I'm going to go back and check on that because I think this here is in the wrong order. So I'll come back to you on that one. But like I said, there's nothing to worry about in test 1, and there's nothing to worry about in test 2 on this piece here. Okay, so that's really it for topic 5. The rest, I put some other slides in here just to talk about AI, but it's it's for information only. So I'll just ask you if you have any questions at all. Any questions? Okay, I know there's a lot in this course. I'm trying to make it easier for you to kind of get to the nub of what you should study for. I'm hoping I did that. If you still have any questions, I'll be checking my smartphone here for till the from now until the test ends. So I'll be able to answer some questions. I definitely won't answer questions during the test period though, unless they're totally related to something different and not kind of asking me to. Well, I'll clarify on a question. I think they're so straightforward. I don't have to. But yeah, if there's any clarity that you need, I'll try to respond that real time. But
So like
we'll
assignment related.
Sorry.
So assignment related, not test related.
Yeah, assignment related. Yes, thank you. Okay. Again, yeah, I think if you watch these videos, if you kind of pulled out the first part of that chart that I showed you in terms of what's in the commentary that's highlighted in yellow, look for those keys, look for what's been underlined and bolded mainly, and then go into those presentations by the people who put together the Revel Pearson Revel text, and I think you'll be in good shape. Okay. Any final questions? Okay. Well, we'll call it a day then, and I wish you the best of luck. And again, just make sure that you're all set up and ready to go before you decide to start that test. Okay. Take care.
Thank you, Gary. Bye.
Hey, you're welcome.